Shalom. Okay, we had a little technical difficulty there. I think I didn't have my microphone off. I am live from Yerushalayim this week. And I am back by popular request. People are just really wanting to know what happened with the show. So first of all, for those of you who've been kind of keeping track and have been missing me, I've just got so much on my plate right now and I had to make some room. I have been working on translating the Hebrew manuscripts that have been recently discovered by Dr. Miles Jones, collected by Dr. Miles Jones of B'nai Emunah Institute. And we have been working on translating those into English. And it's been an all-consuming project between that and wrapping up my biblical Hebrew class. I just did not have the time to commit to continuing this podcast. But here I am. I'm in Jerusalem. And it has been an amazing journey, both getting here and being here. And I've had a lot of friends and fans reach out and say, hey, when are you going to go back on, keep doing the Kosher News and Torah Talk? We miss it. So here I am, and we're going to discuss the parashat for this week. And it's a parashat that's about turning the other cheek. And I think it's important that a lot of Christianity, mainstream Christianity, kind of feels like they have a corner on the market of this idea, this teaching of Yeshua's to turn the other cheek. But in fact, in this parashat, that's exactly what Moshe is demonstrating to an incredible degree. I mean, it just blows my mind how much mercy and compassion he had and patience. And in this parashat, one of my favorite parts of this, it's in Numbers 12, verses 11 through 13. And, excuse me, I'm getting a little bit ahead of myself. Actually, what I really wanted to cover first is where Moshe is just really overwhelmed. And it's actually in 11, Numbers 11, or Bimidbar 11. And it starts in verse 13, really verse 12, okay? And we'll just go back a little bit here and start at verse 10 to give some context. It says, Then Moshe heard the people weep throughout their families, every man in the door of his tent. And they're weeping really because they miss the settled life. I mean, they're talking about foods that they had in Mitzrayim, but they're really missing the settled life because remember, they have flocks. They had meat. It wasn't that they were tired of, manna and being their only food. That was their staple. But of course, they had their flocks that they came out of Egypt with. So they could slaughter a nice fat cow. They could slaughter some goats or some sheep. They probably even had some birds with them. But they really wanted these leeks, these onions. They missed the river and then, Nile River and all the fish they were getting out of that. And so that was really what they were missing, was this food that comes from having a settled life. And so they were being so short-sighted and not remembering all the bondage and the hardship that they were going through there in Mitzrayim, but really just looking at the things they missed. And isn't that like our human nature? Don't we always, we miss the things that are good about something and we kind of forget the bad parts. So that's what they're doing here. And Moshe is just at his wit's end. I mean, here they are. They're crying out, oh, we miss Mitzrayim. And he's like, oh my gracious, how can you say this? We saw miracles performed to bring us out of bondage. And how can you be so shallow as to wish that you were in bondage just so you could eat some leeks and onions or fish? I mean, I like those things too, but I think I value my freedom more. This is a theme that we need to look at as a world. How much do we value our freedom and what are we willing to give up to keep our freedom? So in this case, they were willing to give up their freedom for some leeks and onions and a little bit of fish. And Moshe is just at his wit's end. And it says, then he heard them weeping, right? And the anger of Yehovah was kindled greatly. Moshe also was displeased. And Moshe said unto Yehovah, wherefore have you afflicted your servant? And wherefore have I not found favor in your sight that you lay the burden of all this people on me? He's like, why me? Have I conceived all this people? And this is the part I really like for here in verse 12. Have I conceived all this people? Have I begotten them that you should say unto me, carry them in your bosom as a nursing father bears the suckling child unto the lands which you swore unto their fathers? Whence should I have flesh to give unto all these people? For they weep unto me, saying, give us flesh that we may eat. I'm not able to bear all this people alone because it's too heavy for me. And if you deal this way with me, just kill me, I pray you, out of hand, if I have found favor in your sight, and let me not see my wretchedness. he is at the point of just being ready to give up. He's like, you know what? Just do me in, because I know I have you to look forward to. I know I have the Olam Haba to look forward to. And this is just so much. It's too much for me. I cannot do it. And so, I think we've all felt that. We've all felt overwhelmed at different points. And I don't think any of us can put ourselves in the place of Moshe leading these hundreds of thousands, possibly millions of people through the wilderness and dealing with all their little petty grievances here and there. I mean, they're every minute. We wish we were, whoa, why did you bring us out here in the wilderness to die, Moshe? Oh, it's so terrible. And, yet Yehovah in his graciousness and his goodness is continually kind of making concession for these people, mostly, pretty much primarily only because of Moshe's begging. Look, I'm really sorry. Please just kind of turn the other way on this one. Father, can you just give them one more chance? And at this point, he's like, you know what? I'm not going to beg for these people. Just take me out. I'm tired of being the intercessor for these people. I cannot take it anymore. And I love the sarcasm. And it's maybe missed in our modern society now because there's kind of some confusion about whether men can get pregnant, at least among the more woke out there. But Moshe is clearly not confused about this fact. And so it's just pure, utter sarcasm. Like, hey, look, I didn't bring these people into the world. I'm not responsible for these people. And they're acting like babies, right? And why am I in the position that I need to carry them in my bosom like a nursing father bearing a suckling child? What exactly is a nursing father? But anyway, we get the idea. Moshe is fed up. He's overwhelmed. He is just at his wit's end. And, this is part of why Yehovah is so upset. He's like, look, I can't believe these people. All the things they put, me through. And then, look, Moshe's always standing up for them, and they're putting him through that. It's just too much. And his anger was kindled, and of course the fire of Yehovah burnt among them and consumed the ones that were all the way into the uttermost parts of the camp, right? And then the people start crying out to Moshe, and of course, what does Moshe do? He supplicates to Yehovah, and the fire's quenched. So we have to consider what's going on here. He was at his wit's end and ready to give up his own life to not have to deal with these people's fussing. And it would have been a very natural reaction for Moshe to be kind of like, they're getting what they deserve, and just kind of sit by and watch them roast. But instead, he cries out to Yehovah and says, you know what? I'm sorry. I got to do it again. He had so much love, so much compassion, so much mercy in himself. He was like, you know what? I can't bear to watch these people, these women, these children, all of them being punished like this. So, and in verse 4, 11:4, we have a word here that's translated in the version I'm reading. Is the Et Sefer, very good version of the Bible. If you don't have it, it's got all of the books of your traditional Jewish Bible, all of the books of your traditional Christian Bible, and then it also has the addition of Jubilees, also called Yovelim in Hebrew. It's got Tobias, it's got Judith, Baruch, it's got all these apocryphal texts that are just amazing and put things into light for us. So I highly recommend it. But in this version it says, and I have not looked back to the Hebrew, but I'm almost sure, because this is a very literal translation. It says, and the mixed multitude, we're looking at Numbers 11:4, and the mixed multitude that was among them fell to lusting. Okay? So the mixed multitude, in Hebrew, I'm almost sure what is written here is Erev Rav. And Erev Rav is a very important term because it's something we're dealing with now. It can be translated mixed multitude, but remember, Erev is also the evening, and it's the evening because it's the time of the mixing of daylight and night. And so that we say in English twilight. Really, that would be a more proper pronunciation for Erev is twilight. But so it's this mixing, this concept of mixing, and then we have Rav, which is, of course, great. And it's, so this is kind of a double entendre, right? This mixed multitude is also kind of, in a Kabbalistic sense, we can say it's like the great darkness, right? They're these ones that are not in the light. They're not walking in the light of Yehovah. they're walking in darkness. They're walking in ignorance. And unfortunately, the people controlling our world right now are very much downlaod on many levels. They are, these agents of darkness, agents trying to squelch the light, vainly so, because we know who wins in the end. But right now, they feel like they're on top. So I wanted to draw your attention to that. But let's now move forward and we'll see how Yehovah deals with this. So he, in his mercy, he, decides, hey, look, you get 70, when Moshe cries out to him and he's like at his wit's end after this burning, after these people were completely consumed for their whining and their complaining, he says, you know what? Bring 70 elders of Israel who you know to be respectable people, right? And bring them there, and I'm going to talk with you there, and I'm going to take of the Ruach, the Spirit, the anointing, which is upon you, and I'm going to put it on them. So he's going to divide. And this is not the first time, or rather, this is not the only time we see this in the Tanakh, this idea. And we see it with Elisha and Elijah, where the anointing, this double portion that Elisha asks for. Elisha is what a lot of English speakers say, but it's really Elisha, and which seems like a girl's name, but this is a gentleman. And he wanted a double portion of Elijah's spirit, and he got it. And so here we have, each of these elders being given a 70th of this Ruach that's on Moshe. And when that's divided among these 70 elders, it's very interesting to point out that there was a couple of them that did not come up when they were supposed to. And they were out in the camp, and they still received. There was 2 of them, I think it was, verse 26. There were 2 of the men in the camp, okay, Eldad and Medad. And they were selected by Moshe to receive a portion of this Ruach, but they didn't come. Maybe they saw everything Moshe had been through. They're probably good friends of his, right? And they knew, and he was like, guys, and they were like, man, we don't want any part of this, and they're not going to notice 68 people. They're not going to notice we're missing, right? But in fact, Yehovah noticed. He knows us each by name. And so they began prophesying in the camp, even though they didn't go to the tabernacle to receive their portion of the Ruach. And of course, Joshua, the son of Nun, Joshua, the servant and assistant of Moshe, he comes up to Moshe and he's like, hey, look, tell them not to do this, forbid them, right? They're out there prophesying, like, how dare they? And Moshe's like, hey, look, this is fine. I wish they would all prophesy. This is a good thing if they're in touch with the Ruach. Don't worry about it. It's okay. Kind of, if they're not against us, they're for us, right? So then the next thing that happens, the quail are brought forth, and these people are literally up to their nostrils in meat. You want meat? I'm going to give you meat. And so, of course, we know that there was the graves of lust there because they were lusting after this settled life, this life where they had, ready, easy meat. I mean, anyone who's cleaned any kind of animal, slaughtering a sheep compared to cleaning a couple fish is just not even a comparison. So they missed that, and because of that lustfulness, because of that really lack of appreciation for the freedom that Yehovah had worked wonders to bring them, they were punished. And so here again, Moshe has this opportunity to be like, you know what? They just got what they deserved. And yet he shows his mercy over and over and over again, right? And so the next thing that happens, and we've got to think there's a relationship here between the dividing of the Spirit on the 70 elders, between, all of these things happening, and, somebody starts to complain. And in fact, it was the 2 people closest to Moshe, Miriam and Aharon, right? And they were speaking against Moshe, and they made the point about this Cushite woman, right? But really, the bigger point here was, hey, look, Yehovah's spoken to us too, right? He's spoken by us and through us. And, what makes Moshe so special? They literally say in verse 12:2, and they said, has Yehovah indeed spoken only by Moshe? Has he not spoken also by us? And Yehovah heard it. Right? They didn't even necessarily tell Moshe this. They were just kind of grumbling, gossiping. Lashon hara, evil speech. And Yehovah doesn't like that. He really despises evil speech. And so Yehovah spoke to Moshe and also to Aaron and Miriam and says, hey, you three come to the assembly. And so it's such a picture of, as a parent, like, hey, you get over here right now, right? They were like, oh my goodness. And of course, Moshe is, I'm sure, he's like, oh wow, what's going on? And he apparently doesn't know. We anyway aren't led to believe that he knows what he's being called for, but he knows in his heart he's clean. So he's like wondering. And of course, Miriam and Aaron probably had an idea of what they were being called out for, that we can't say for certain. But when he came down in this pillar of cloud and he showed himself, basically he stood in the door of the tabernacle and he called Aaron and Miriam. Right? This is what they wanted, right? They wanted to be the ones in charge. And he said, hear now my words. If there be a prophet among you, I, Yehovah, will make myself known unto him in a vision and will speak unto him in a dream. But my servant Moshe is not so, for he is faithful in all my house. With him I will speak mouth to mouth, even apparently, and not in dark speeches. In the similitude of Yehovah shall he behold. Wherefore then were ye not afraid to speak against my servant Moshe? He's like, you think you're equal to Moshe? Because you have a dream sometimes, or I reveal a word to you in your heart and you share it. No, let me tell you, me and Moshe, it's face to face. We get real. And I have to think they must have been terrified, because this is the first experience either of them, to our knowledge, has had with being this close to the presence of the Most High. And so he really puts them in their place, and he's angry. And when the cloud departs from them, Miriam became leprous, as white as snow. And Aaron looked at her and he was like, oh my goodness. And of course he cried out, oh, Moshe, do something. This is terrible. We can't, look at her. Her skin's rotting off her flesh. This is terrible. And what does Moshe do? Once again, he has this opportunity to just kind of stand by. Well, she deserved it. She shouldn't have been gossiping. Shouldn't have done Lashon Hara. And there is a connection between Lashon Hara and the leprosy. This is not the first and only time. Rather, it's not the only time in the Tanakh this comes up. There is a connection. Even in modern Judaism, they understand that there is a connection between these things. So it's apparent that Miriam was the instigator, at least by the consequence that is doled out here. And so she becomes leprous. And Aaron is obviously also party to this, because he was called out as well. But at the same time, so that shows that just listening to evil speech, just listening to gossip is also a sin. If you think that you're absolved because you don't spread it, if you're sitting there listening, kind of laughing along, or even just kind of listening and not calling the person out saying, hey, excuse me, I don't really want to participate in this. This isn't healthy. This isn't good speech. This isn't holy. Then you are part of the problem. Because people who gossip, if they don't have anybody to gossip to, and every time they bring their gossip around, other people are kind of condemning them for it and being like, hey, whoa, we don't talk like that around here. Who are they going to talk to? So it takes two parts. It takes somebody speaking and it takes somebody listening. And here again, Moshe had the option to just say, look, not my fault, not my problem. I'm done. Look, I wanted to just give up. Like, I was basically at the point of suicide because of this. I was, Chas v'shalom, not suicide, because of course he wouldn't have taken his own life, but he was ready to give it up over all of this just build up over years, all of this stress he'd had for all this time leading these people out. And yet here he does the unthinkable. He turns the other cheek in a very literal way, and he prays to Yehovah, hey, look, I know she did this terrible thing, but please heal her now, right? And what does Yehovah say? In verse 14, Yehovah said unto Moshe, if her father had but spit in her face, should she not be ashamed 7 days? Let her be shut out from the camp 7 days, and after that let her be received in again. And Miriam was shut out from the camp 7 days, and the people journeyed not until Miriam was brought in again. And afterward the people removed from Chatzeroth and pitched in the wilderness of Paran. So there is such a clear, and this is not the only example. I mean, time after time after time, the mercy he showed was just incredible. And that's why Yehovah chose him, to put his spirit on. That's why he selected him. When he picks somebody, He picks the right person because he knows their heart, and he knew the heart of Moshe was tender, was meek, was compassionate, that he was a social justice warrior. Remember, when he left Mitzrayim to begin with, why did he leave? Because he intervened in this Hebrew slave being wronged, and he saw the wrong being done, and he said, hey, look, this isn't okay. And he took the life to defend a life. Okay, and that's an important point. He didn't murder, he defended the innocent. There's a big difference. Christianity does not always acknowledge that, but there is. And, he had to, he didn't flee immediately, but then the next time he kind of tried to intervene in between two Hebrew people fighting. It's like, hey guys, come on, look, you're brothers. Like, hey, who are you to us? You gonna strike me down like you did the Egyptian there? Ooh, you heard about that. Man, I better get out of here. I wonder who else knows about it. These Hebrew slaves know about it. Everybody must know about it. So he had to get out of Dodge. And it was that compassion, that heart for justice, that heart for the right thing being done. And it's important that his justice is always balanced with mercy, because maybe it was the right thing for Miriam to just be a leper from now on and stay shut out of the camp. Maybe it was the right thing for these people to be burned up and struck down and poisoned by quail, but all of it drew mercy out of Moshe's heart. And so we need to have that kind of a heart. And guys, it's getting real. Praise Yehovah, we are through the COVID pandemic. We're coming out on the other side. People are moving around like normal. I am in Israel, in one of the countries that was the most restrictive in the world. You could not buy, sell, or trade if you did not have your green pass. Very, very, very limited options. You could buy groceries, but it was very difficult. They made it very exceedingly difficult riding buses, riding trains. So how do you get there if you didn't have a car? A lot of people don't have cars, especially when they live in the towns. So it was, walking to the store, and even there, there was a stigma. And so very few Israelis were able to not get that. I won't say what, but they needed to get the green pass. And it was very much forced on people. Masks were forced, everything, right? And here I am, and I can probably count on, maybe it would take two hands, probably one hand, the number of masks that I've seen walking around the old city these past 4 days, 5 days, however long I've been here in Jerusalem. The past 2 weeks that I've been here in Israel, just very few people. And most of them look to be tourists, honestly. That are, kind of just creeping out and feeling safe to get out. So praise the Father, we're through that. Baruch Shem Kavod. But now they're talking about this monkeypox business. Give me a break. They're kind of gauging back the news about it because people are like, wait, what? Are you kidding me? Right? But the World Health Organization just called an emergency meeting about this. And it's like less than 1,000 cases worldwide. Now, granted, if this was contagious in the way COVID is, then it could very quickly spread. But they've said repetitively, and this is what we're seeing is the same double talk from the beginning. Oh, it's not going to be a problem. And it's only transmitted, really through physical contact and with the actual lesions. And then it was like, oh, well, you could get it through respiratory droplets. Wait, respiratory monkeypox? What are we talking about, guys? So if you do a little bit of digging, then you're going to find that they're definitely trying to push the same kinds of narratives. Now, to what end? How far will they take it? How much will people buy it? Are we all so fed up with the pandemics that we're not going to buy it? Hopefully so. On the other hand, it is mind-blowing. There are people in Canada that their bank accounts are still frozen, and they are dealing with, there's people still locked up over the COVID restrictions, having too many people in their church, or, speaking out against it, organizing the Freedom Convoy, all of these things. And it's at which point do we as a global culture stand up and say, enough. We are not going to take it anymore. And how do we do that in a world where the media is so controlled? This last couple weeks, there were some servers pulled off of Discord that Their only crime was sharing information from scientists about the vaccine. And they didn't like what was being shared. So the thing is, we have these disinformation police. Well, that is the hallmark of a communist system. That is the hallmark of a totalitarian regime, is the control of information. If we don't have the ability to speak freely, I don't care if I'm telling you that I think the aliens are going to invade from Mars next week. The assumption that you, as my audience, are not rational and intelligent enough to sort fact from fiction, to do a little back-checking. Wait a minute, where is she getting this? Oh, I saw NASA images. Okay, so go to the NASA website. There's always a source to follow. And if there's not, if you're getting information from places where they're giving you no sources whatsoever, not even like an indication of where to look, then you're probably not getting your information from the right place. But we are all rational thinking adults, okay? We can consider what is going on in our world. We can consider alternative perspectives on what's going on, and it's not a danger to society to present an alternative viewpoint. But, of course, they're going to push the narrative as far as people take it. So now let me bring this full circle and say, how do we apply this teaching of turning the other cheek? Does this mean laying down and taking whatever they give us? Does this mean, tolerating these totalitarian regimes taking over and saying, well, we need to be, good, humble believers about it? Or are we looking at it from a wrong perspective? And let me explain what I mean by that. Moshe was standing up for justice continually. He wasn't going to let the people, persist in their sins and their abominations without being punished. But he wanted mercy in the punishment. He wanted the punishment to be merciful, right? And so, in the same way, we can stand up against injustice. We can demand that justice be done. But we need to always have an eye on mercy as well. And so, for example, there are a lot of people who wanted to see certain politicians hung for their crimes, and maybe they deserve that. I'm not going to be the one to say they don't. But there is a judge, and he in heaven, and he is the one in charge of ultimately administering justice. And as we see from this parashat, he knows when and where to do it. So when our superpower, and I've touched on this in other episodes, is prayer. And our other superpower is information. If we silence ourselves because we're afraid we'll be censored next, then they've already won. As an example, like I talked about the pulling down of some Discord servers because of the information they were sharing, there were people on our private server that said, hey, if we've got information in that regard, maybe we should kind of clean up our pages. And I said, you know what? I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to self-censor, because that's exactly what they want. They want people to be afraid enough that, oh no. No, instead, I'm going to create other avenues for connecting with people, for connecting with believers. And so I am right now in the process of setting up a Learn Worlds community where people can connect, and it's a paid server, so you have a lot more. Where the server I'm using now is completely free on Discord. By the way, I will try to add the link there in the description later when it's all posted, for those of you who want to be a part of that. But and you know what? If there's somebody out there that cares enough to come and try to censor me, bring it on, because you know what? I'm not afraid, and I've said this before. I'm going to speak the truth, and if I'm censored for it, so help me, Yehovah. He's in control. He has his will and his way. And you know what? I'm a pretty persistent person, and I will find other ways to reach out. I'm not going to give up. Because unlike these people in ancient Israel, and they weren't even in Israel yet, these ancient Hebrews, who were ready to give up their freedom for a bite of fish, I won't do it. I know what my freedom's worth. I do. And I know that largely because, let me just address the Second Amendment if I can dare. In Belize, in Central America where I live, it is a very, very highly controlled system. You cannot just go purchase a gun at a Walmart, 1821 or otherwise. In fact, the only way to get a gun is to apply for a license, and the process for applying entails corruption. I'm sorry, it's just how it is. You cannot legally get a gun without bribing certain individuals, which I will leave unnamed for their protection in mind, I suppose. And that's just how the system works. It's a corrupt system. So what it means is that the only people that can have guns in Belize are criminals, because you can very easily procure an illegal gun, much easier than going through the legal route, which still entails breaking the law by technically handing off some extra fees to certain individuals. That's the one route. Or the other route is to just go get them on the street, and that's much easier. So my point is, the idea behind it, it's a system that came from, it's a British Commonwealth nation, so it's a system that came out of the whole parliamentary justice system in the UK. And God save the Queen. As you know, it's very, very restrictive gun control in Europe. And in Belize, it's got that similar restriction. Now, the thing is, it doesn't prevent the criminals from having guns. It doesn't prevent bad people from getting guns. It makes it much, much, much more difficult for law-abiding citizens. And I'll say it makes it impossible for law-abiding citizens to obtain a legal firearm without at least bending the rules, we'll say. That's not a healthy system, okay? It does not curb violence, because you know what? At the end of the day, people chop each other up with a machete if they want to go through domestic violence and the gang wars. The gangsters in Belize get grenades black market and throw them at each other sometimes. So the idea that if we tightly control guns, then it's going to save all the children is a farce. It's a complete and total farce. And so when I see these things that are being painted as this really, we need to have red flag laws. Okay, that sounds great. In theory, the idea that, okay, well, what do you do if your neighbor's threatening to kill his wife or you or whatever? And what do you do if you found yourself in the position where you know this guy? You know this guy good. He's crazy. He's, dangerous. He talks crazy all the time and he's got guns. Well, unfortunately, the idea that you can take away someone's rights before they've committed a crime is a very dangerous footing, because people can abuse that. So, for example, if this guy wants to kill his wife, he can turn around and she's got guns to protect herself, or his neighbor, or whatever. He can turn around and report them and say, look, she threatened to kill herself. She threatened to kill my son. She threatened to kill the neighbor, whatever. He gets her guns confiscated. Now she's defenseless and he can murder her. So you cannot fix the problem with these red flag laws. And I'm not saying that we don't need to come up with some solutions, but jumping to banning assault rifles, I believe, don't take my word for this, search your sources out, but I believe Joe Biden even discussed banning 9mm weapons. The idea of this seems on its surface like, well, yeah, what do people need these guns for? Let me tell you what they need these guns for. And this goes back to, where do we draw the line and say enough is enough? There is a type of insurance in having an armed population. Criminals are more intimidated to go do armed burglaries if they think that that guy might have an AK in there, or a 9mm, or they don't know what kind of gun. And totalitarian regimes are terrified of an armed populace. That's why gun grabbing is one of the first steps in a country where they're pushing communist totalitarian doctrines. So, in a perfect world, we don't need guns. No one does. But it's not a perfect world, and it's not going to be a perfect world until the Messiah comes. So, before I leave you guys off, because we've just got a few minutes here left, I want to remind you that our first and foremost duty as believers is to pray, not only for other believers, not for family and our neighbors, we should be doing that, of course. But also for our enemies. And the line that we need to draw between being complete pushovers and being prayer warriors is that we don't need to just pray that they, we don't need to just sit by idly and pray while they take everyone's rights away. We do need to unite as a body of believers and find prayerful, intelligent ways to peacefully and civilly disobey unjust laws. But when we pray, we don't need to just pray that they're completely absolved either. We can pray for justice to be administered. We can ask Yehovah to stand up for the voiceless. We can ask Yehovah to intervene. And my biggest prayer these last months has been, Yehovah, not my will but yours, but we need your Messiah. We need the Messiah. And as I sit here, I'm sitting underneath some olive trees that are probably certainly hundreds, if not more than 1,000 years old, in this beautiful, picturesque neighborhood of Yamin Moshe, which means the right hand of Moses. Has an interesting story behind it as well. As I sit here looking at the city walls of Yerushalayim, the capital of Elohim's government, I'm reminded that I am called as Moshe and as Yeshua to stand up for justice and for righteousness, but to also show mercy and compassion, and to pray that Yehovah will administer justice, but with mercy. And so judgment is due for all the crimes, all the millions of unborn children that have been murdered at the hands of this idea of women's reproductive rights. The abominations that have been perpetuated and put beside the sacred institution of marriage. All of these things need to be come against. We need to stand against these in a prayerful way. But we can't forget the other side of mercy. Because remember, Yehovah desires mercy over judgment. And that's why he selected Moshe, because he knew Moshe had a heart like that as well. So let us, each and every one of us, seek to submit our heart completely to the Creator of heaven and earth and ask him to change our heart. I'm going to leave you off with an a cappella song. People have been wanting me to do some live streaming of psalms here, and I had to hang up, for those of you who don't know. My iPad that has all the soundtracks on it, the app that they're connected to, GarageBand, got deleted, and with it the data. And I seem to have some backup copies on a Google Drive account somewhere, but I'm having trouble accessing that from here, so I just gave it to the Creator of heaven and earth. Said, you know what, you know better than me. So, and I decided I'm going to do this Kosher News and Torah Talk podcast instead this week. So here you have it. Change my heart, Yehovah, make it ever true. Change my heart, oh yeah, may I be like you. You are the potter, I am the clay. Mold me and make me. This is what I pray. Change my heart, oh yeah. Make it ever true. Change my heart, oh yeah. May I be like you. You are the potter, I am the clay. Mold me and make me. This is what I pray. Change my heart, Yehovah. Make it ever true. Change my heart, oh Yah. May I be like you. Amen. Father, change our hearts. Give us a heart like Moshe had. Give us a heart like your son Yeshua HaMashiach had, that we may also be conformed to your perfect image, Father, as you have a heart of love and a heart of justice. May we also cultivate these things in ourselves. In your holy name I pray, Yehovah Eloheinu, Melech Haolam. Amen.